godfather had arrived. Arthur Thompson, Glasgow's most feared crime boss, the man who had survived car bombs, assassination attempts, and 40 years of gang warfare, was finally facing his reckoning. Outside the High Court in Glasgow, the streets were tense. Police watched carefully. Everyone knew what was at stake. The longest and most expensive trial in Scottish legal history was about to begin. They were there for Paul Ferris, Thompson's former enforcer, accused of murdering the old man's son. But this story begins decades earlier, in the industrial wasteland of Springburn, North Glasgow. Back in September 1931, Arthur Thompson was born into an ordinary working-class family. His father worked the steel mills. The area was rough, but not particularly criminal. At the time, Thompson was just a boy in a city where violence was currency and respect came through fear. The nickname, the Godfather, would come later, earned through decades of brutality. By age 12, Thompson had already graduated from fists to open razors. He would slash first, ask questions never. In a Glasgow street fight, hesitation got you killed. Though social conditions improved over the years, post-war Springburn remained an area of high deprivation, where crime and violence were far too common. Thompson started out as a bouncer and small-time thief before moving into the money-lending trade, building his empire through two simple rules: pay on time or face the consequences. The consequences were unlike anything Glasgow had seen before. When someone owed Arthur Thompson money and couldn't pay, he didn't just threaten them. He hammered 6-inch nails through their hands, pinning them to the floor, left them there, screaming. The crucifixion method sent a message across the city: you don't cheat, Arthur Thompson. Even behind bars during his first prison sentence, an 18-month stretch in the early 1950s, he kept building contacts, protecting his interests, making sure no one tried to take over his patch. Shortly after his release, he expanded beyond Glasgow. Thompson headed to London, where the Kray twins ruled the underworld with an iron fist. The twins, Ronnie and Reggie, were the most feared gangsters in Britain. When Thompson started operating in their territory, word got back. The message was clear: leave or die. There was reportedly a price on his head. Most men would have fled. Thompson walked straight into the lion's den. He found the Krays at the Double R Club in East London. Thompson walked through the front door, alone, and asked to see them. When Ronnie and Reggie Kray appeared, probably expecting to deliver a beating, Thompson reached into his coat. He pulled out a sawn-off shotgun, both barrels pointed at the most dangerous men in London. "I'm Arthur Thompson," he said quietly, his Scottish accent cutting through the silence. "From Glasgow. You'll not forget me." The exact words vary depending on who tells the story. Some say he made one of them kneel. Others claim he told them to kiss my arse. What's not disputed is this: a Glasgow loan shark had just pulled a gun on the Kray twins in their own club and walked out alive. Thompson backed out slowly, gun trained on them, then disappeared. Either the Krays would hunt him down, or the matter was settled. The matter was settled. Rather than start a war, the Krays hired Thompson as an enforcer. He worked London jobs, made London money, and built a reputation that stretched beyond Scotland. Even Mad Frankie Fraser, a hardened London gangster, would later describe the Glasgow criminal scene as the Wild West. Bad news for Thompson's rivals back home. That reputation meant he had a point to prove to those who might challenge him. Before Thompson's complete takeover of Glasgow, the city had already seen waves of gang violence stretching back generations. Razor gangs, territorial wars, protection rackets. But Thompson brought something different: organization, investment, strategic thinking. By the mid-1960s, he controlled much of Glasgow's underworld: protection rackets, illegal gambling, loan sharking. Legitimate businesses too: bars, clubs, all of it laundering criminal profits. But one family wouldn't bow. The Welsh family from Blackhill, vicious and heavily armed. They started muscling in on Thompson's territory. Thompson gathered his crew, Teddy Martin, Paddy Meehan, and others. They went to settle it the Glasgow way, armed with knives, meat cleavers, and hatchets. The Welsh family was waiting with guns. Thompson's crew retreated under gunfire. It was the first time anyone had successfully pushed him back. The humiliation burned. Then in August 1966, someone planted a bomb underneath Arthur Thompson's MG Magnet. Thompson didn't know it was there when he turned the key. His mother-in-law, Maggie Johnston, was in the passenger seat. The bomb exploded. The blast tore through the vehicle, shredding metal and glass. Maggie Johnston was killed instantly. Thompson survived, seriously injured, but bleeding heavily from multiple wounds. He was rushed to Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Doctors placed him on the critical list. He survived. Bad news for the Welsh family. That survival meant he had a point to prove. Shortly after recovering, Thompson spotted Patrick Welsh and James Goldie driving through Glasgow. Both were Welsh gang members he suspected of planting the bomb. Thompson didn't hesitate. He rammed their van repeatedly with his car until it careened off the road and smashed into a lamppost at full speed. Both men died on impact. To this day, witnesses remember the sound of metal crunching, the screams, the silence after. Thompson was charged with double murder. The police built what they thought was a solid case. But when trial time came, not a single witness would testify against Arthur Thompson. The case collapsed. He walked free. Though not suspected of every murder in Glasgow, he had sent a clear message. Cross Thompson, you die. Talk about Thompson, you die. And while all this was happening, Thompson's wife Rita decided to handle matters herself. In 1969, she forced her way into the Welsh family home in Black Hill. Inside was the wife of Patrick Welsh, the man Thompson had killed. Rita Thompson walked into that house carrying a knife. She stabbed the woman in the chest. The victim survived. Rita was arrested, charged, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. She served the time without complaint. It was personal. Within years of the Welsh family war, Thompson had become a major player, not just in Glasgow, but across Britain. By the late 1960s, Thompson lived well. He owned bars and clubs. He ran protection rackets across the city. And he'd moved into something more profitable, gun running to Northern Ireland during the Troubles. He smuggled weapons to loyalist paramilitaries, making substantial cash rewards while the country tore itself apart. It didn't go unnoticed. MI5 was watching. British intelligence didn't want a Scottish gangster arming sectarian violence. They approached Thompson with a proposition: become an informant, feed them information, and in return, he'd receive immunity from prosecution. Thompson took the deal. At first, police and prosecutors struggled to understand why cases against Thompson kept falling apart. They had evidence, witnesses, solid investigations. Then the truth emerged. Thompson was protected. However, Thompson's real standing in the criminal world worked in his favor. The more crimes he committed, the more valuable his intelligence became. Slowly, he built an empire that seemed untouchable. One witness later said, he literally terrorized whole areas of Glasgow and reaped substantial rewards. By the 1980s, Thompson had moved into the heroin trade. The market was worth up to £30 million, and the Thompson family controlled a massive chunk of it. His son, Arthur Thompson Jr., nicknamed Fat Boy, ran the drug operation. They flooded Glasgow with heroin. Hundreds overdosed. Entire generations were destroyed. Ironically, Thompson's own daughter, Margaret, died from a heroin overdose in 1989. The same poison her family was spreading through the streets. Thompson showed no remorse. By the 1990s, he was earning an estimated £100,000 per week from loan sharking alone. Meanwhile, Thompson and his right-hand man, a young enforcer named Paul Ferris, terrorized entire neighborhoods. Ferris started working for Thompson at 19. He collected debts, carried out stabbings, slashings, blindings, all the violence Thompson couldn't be seen doing himself. Ferris was effective, loyal, almost like a son. Then Thompson made a mistake. After Ferris stabbed a man and his dog in front of witnesses, Thompson sent him to hide at the family's holiday home on the Isle of Bute. But Thompson also tipped off the police. Ferris was raided, arrested, and jailed for 18 months for weapons possession. When he got out, the relationship had soured. Ferris believed he'd been betrayed. He was right. Raids on Thompson's safe houses had uncovered heroin, revolvers, sawn-off shotguns, ammunition. But Thompson always walked free, protected by his arrangement with MI5. By 1991, tensions between Thompson and Ferris had reached breaking point. In August that year, Arthur Thompson Jr. was on weekend parole from Norenside Prison in Angus, serving an 11-year sentence for heroin supply. He'd been out just 6 hours. At around 11 p.m., as he walked between the two houses that made up the family home in Provanmill, nicknamed the Ponderosa, he was attacked. 3 shots rang out in the darkness. The first bullet grazed his cheek. The second smashed into his ribs, tearing through a lung. The third was fired deliberately into his anus, ripping through his gut and piercing his heart. Arthur Fatboy Thompson, 31 years old, collapsed and died outside his family fortress. Locals heard the shots. Someone called an ambulance, but it was too late. At first, police got chaos. The scene was contaminated. Witnesses scattered. Everyone knew this would trigger a war. Thompson Sr. was devastated. His son, his heir, was dead. Police immediately arrested Paul Ferris and charged him with murder. He was remanded to Barlinnie Prison. The investigation was massive, Strathclyde Police's biggest murder probe ever. However, Fatboy's death standing in the criminal community worked against normal investigative methods. No one would talk. Slowly, though, evidence began to build. Over 300 witnesses were identified. Phone records, surveillance, forensics. Then something happened that shocked even hardened criminals. On September 19th, 1991, the day of Arthur Thompson Jr.'s funeral, a car was discovered in Glasgow's East End. Inside were 2 bodies, Robert Bobby Glover and Joe Bananas Hanlon. Both were close associates of Paul Ferris. Both were suspected of involvement in Fatboy's murder. The execution method would become known as a Glasgow send-off. The bodies had been dumped on the exact route of the funeral procession. When the hearse carrying Fatboy's coffin rolled through the streets that afternoon, it passed the car containing his suspected killers. It was Arthur Thompson Sr.'s message to the underworld. I know who killed my son, and this is what happens. There was also a bomb scare at Ridley Park Cemetery, where Fatboy was to be buried. Armed police swarmed the area. The funeral was chaos. To this day, both murders remain unsolved. Though police have a fair idea who was responsible, proving it would be another matter. In both cases, a code of silence ruled the streets. No one dared speak out. The reputation of Arthur Thompson was enough to keep witnesses quiet. In spring 1992, the trial was moved from Glasgow to the High Court for security reasons. Former associates testified about the gang's drug dealing, money laundering, and violence. They claimed Thompson took the lion's share of profits and handled huge sums of cash. The Crown described Fatboy's killing as a planned, directed attack. Phone records showed Ferris had been in contact with associates around the time of the murder. Then came the most shocking moment of the trial. Arthur Thompson Sr. took the witness stand. In 40 years of crime, Thompson had never testified for the prosecution, never cooperated with police, never broken the code. But this was about his son. Thompson gave evidence against Ferris, describing their relationship, the falling out, the threats. After 6 weeks of disturbing evidence and 54 days of testimony, the jury took little time to reach its verdict. Not guilty. Paul Ferris was acquitted of all charges: the murder of Arthur Thompson Jr., the attempted murder of Arthur Thompson Sr., everything. He walked free from court in June 1992. The trial had cost $4.1 million, making it the longest and most expensive in Scottish legal history at the time. Detective Inspector later said, It was the most difficult case we worked on. Thompson had people terrified. Thompson was crushed. His son was dead. His empire was crumbling. His enemies walked free. In 2009, Thompson failed to attend any more trials. He was already gone. 18 months after the Ferris acquittal, on March 13, 1993, Arthur Thompson died of a heart attack at Glasgow Royal Infirmary. He was 61 years old. The man who survived car bombs, assassination attempts, and 40 years of gang warfare died in a hospital bed. Natural causes. Since then, Thompson has largely disappeared from public view in the history books, though his legend remains. He was buried in Ridley Park Cemetery in the family plot alongside his mother-in-law and his son. His grave was deliberately left unmarked. Gravediggers feared someone he'd wronged might dig him up for revenge. In 2006, his wife Rita died of throat cancer at age 72. His son Billy was stabbed in 2000 but survived, only to die in March 2017. Margaret had already overdosed in 1989. Tracy Thompson is Arthur's only surviving child. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren remain anonymous for safety reasons, fearing reprisals from old enemies. Thompson's gang collectively controlled Glasgow for decades. Most of his associates are now dead or aged beyond criminality. Their leader, however, remains one of Scotland's most notorious gangsters. The Crown never succeeded in seizing the profits of his empire, estimated at millions of pounds hidden in legitimate businesses and offshore accounts. Thompson hoped he would die free, and he did. He beat every charge, survived every hit, outlasted every rival except time itself. However, the Godfather received his final judgment not from a court, but from his own failing heart. The Arthur Thompson story is over, but in Glasgow's underworld, old men still talk about him in quiet voices, looking over their shoulders. The Birdman, the Godfather, the Last Dawn, the legend continues.